There is no two-party system. It's all one party. You can see that more and more every day. I don't even think the parties would be so much of a problem if we got rid of all the departments at the federal government. Now, nobody will advocate for that, but that's what needs to happen. Because, as I said last night, the Reorganization Act brought in the Department of Health, Department of Education, Department of Agriculture, on and on and on, Department of Science. So think about it. If there was no Department of Science at the federal government level, we would have never gotten COVID. Because what has science done with the money they get for research, for gain of function? So, but more than just that, what you elect these representatives and congressmen, right? And what do they spend their time having to do when they're on Capitol Hill? Oversight over all the different federal departments. Then they have to give them our money. And so that's more money coming out of our wallets to fund Department of Ed, Department of Department of Science, Department of Health and Human Services. So how can those representatives or congresspeople ever really be working for you? Like, I'm surprised no conservatives have talked about this, but I think that most of the conservatives that you see want to keep these agencies in place. But here's the thing. If you get rid of these departments, there's no reason for lobbyists. Not really, not for much. It's very simple. Department of Health and Human Services came in under the Reorganization Act. So before that, they didn't have it. So what you had was hospitals that just catered to their community, nurses graduating, doctors graduating, and then working at whatever hospital they worked at, and did what their scope of practice taught them to do, and things were fine. Then the federal government came in and started injecting itself into healthcare, into everything. And the way they did it is using associations, societies, and organizations. Because all of, take, for example, and it's just one of many, American Nurses Association. They were just an alumni at one time. But they became a wing of the government, just like the Endocrine Society did, which is why who sits at the Endocrine Society? A bunch of very sick doctors that support gender-affirming care on youth. You can never get to gender-affirming care on youth if you don't have the Department of Health and Human Services. You just have local communities handling the problems they have with their community, with their people. But there's a whole bunch of people that wouldn't like that because, see, the UN has gotten in that way. Because as I've said many times, and it's not just American Nurses Association, it's all those associations. They tie to another association, and they tie, like American Nurses Association ties to the Global Nurses United, and then they tie to the International Nurse Council at the UN. So that's the reason why all of those departments in the federal government, Department of Ed, Department of Agriculture, Department of Finance, Department of Science, Department of Medicine, all of them should be eliminated. We have a right to that, actually. We have a right to it. Our founders spoke about factions destroying the country. And these are factions. They're all different factions, because what else comes from that stuff? You never will get a women's rights movement that demands this right. You'll never get the transgender lobby group demanding this, or what all the other ones that come up and say, we demand this. If you don't have all of these different departments at the federal government level, it wipes away like 90% of your lobbyists. Then the people that you elect to go represent you are really able to do the job of their constituents and not spend their entire career financing all of these different federal departments. But all of these associations and organizations serve as a way to shape everything. And you may think, well, we need to have some organization. Well, it doesn't seem that the people that know what they're doing. It should really just be shaped on a community level. And as far as shaping people, I mean, really associations were created to shape society. Yeah, I'm kind of sick of people trying to shape society. I mean, had Department of Health and Human, or Department of Children and Family Services never been created, then we wouldn't have Satan babysitting a bunch of children that don't have parents. We wouldn't. Because that's literally like letting Satan babysit your children. Because the federal government is not about fixing anything. It's just another way to take more money from you. And really, all of the problems that have happened to us have happened because of these different departments. I don't know why no conservative is talking about that. Likely because they have some vested interest in all of these departments, but the founders weren't about all this. It all came in 1939 or after. I mean, Department of Ed didn't come in until 72. Health, Education, and Welfare came in 1953. So before that, it was just up to your local communities. Now, you would still have your states, like your blue states, that would push the porn in the classroom, the drag time story hour in the classroom, all of that stuff. But if they don't have federal government funding them, then they'll go bankrupt. Because what has happened over the last few years? People are fleeing those states. So then, if you don't, and the only thing that keeps them afloat is the federal government and probably some globalists. But if you don't have the federal government funding these states or threatening to not fund them because of that stuff, then they go under. So it's not in their interest to go down the dark path they're going. Do you see what I'm saying? The thing that is destroying our country, besides globalists, but globalists are socialists that are really just even further along than socialists. They're communists on a global level. But you can't, all the departments, Department of Ed, Department of Agriculture, Department of Housing, Department of this, all of that. There was a time we didn't have any of that. That's what we need to go back to. Now, I don't know that there's anybody that's willing to allow us that kind of freedom, but we deserve it. That's what our founders wanted. Then you don't have all these, but there's so many people too, though, that would want to protect these agencies. They want our money to fund science. I don't want to fund science when they do gain of function research. Are you kidding me? But they'll say, we need to fund it so we can, what? To get to where? To where we have AI controlling I mean, think of all of these departments we have funded, science and technology, all of this. And look at what they've done to healthcare. Look at what they've done when it comes to more viruses being created. Look at what they've done with now AI being, could be a possible just destroyer of everything. I mean, if we never had any of these departments, no Department of Science, no Department of Technology, no Department of Ed, no Department of Health and Human Services, then what we have is basically free people handling things at their local level. And then we don't need lobbyists. The only reason you have all these lobbyists is because you have all these different federal departments. They all need to be eliminated. I just don't know why there is no conservative talking about that. I mean, don't you want your your senators and your representatives that serve you to actually be serving their community? How can they? They spend most of their time having to do oversight and talk and do hearings with Department of Ed, Department of Health and Human Services, CDC, Department of Science, I mean, how can they ever work for you? It's pointless. So the Reorganization Act was taking us into the total socialist system. The Green New Deal is we want to take you into the globalist system, which is the communism. So we need to get rid of all of it. We need to get rid of all of these departments. Then you never get to a place where you have gender affirming care on youth. You only get to that place because of lobbyists like the transgender lobby that then can go and complain to these different departments, and then they demand to the senators and the representatives that we need this funding. So the best, quickest way to get back to our freedoms and be safer from viruses and safer in general is eliminate all the federal departments.